The iron shackles bit into Sarah Ashford's wrists as two men dragged her through the muddy streets of Eagle Pass, Texas, her knees scraping against frozen ground while townspeople gathered to watch her humiliation in the bitter December cold of 1882. She had worked as a seamstress in the general store for 3 years, saving every penny to buy passage back east to her ailing mother in Philadelphia. Mrs. Cordelia Whitmore, the store owner's wife, had accused Sarah of stealing a ruby brooch that morning. The accusation was false, planted evidence that Sarah discovered too late was meant to cover Mrs. Whitmore's own gambling debts. But in Eagle Pass, the word of a wealthy merchant's wife held more weight than that of a 22-year-old seamstress with no family to defend her. The makeshift trial lasted less than an hour. Judge Thornton, who owed significant money to Mr. Whitmore's bank, declared Sarah guilty without allowing her to speak in her own defense. The sentence was swift and cruel, public punishment followed by banishment from town. In the freezing temperatures that had descended upon southern Texas in an unusual winter storm, banishment meant almost certain death. Sarah's threadbare dress offered little protection as they hauled her to the town square. Her long auburn hair, usually pinned neatly beneath a bonnet, hung loose and tangled around her face. She tried to maintain her dignity, but fear clawed at her throat. The temperature had dropped below freezing for 3 days straight, and snow covered the ground in a rare blanket of white that shocked even the oldest residents of Eagle Pass. "Please," she whispered to the deputy, gripping her left arm. "I did not take that brooch. I swear on my mother's life." He would not meet her eyes. "Not my place to question the judge, miss." They threw her against the wooden post in the center of the square. Sarah's cheek hit the rough timber, splitting the skin. Warm blood trickled down her face, a stark contrast to the icy air that burned her lungs with each breath. Marshal Davies stood before the gathered crowd, his weathered face impassive as he read the sentence aloud. For the crime of theft, Sarah Ashford is hereby stripped of her position, her lodging, and her place in this community. Let it be known that she is unwelcome in Eagle Pass and shall receive no aid or comfort from any citizen. The crowd murmured, some faces showing pity, others satisfaction. Mrs. Whitmore stood on the general store's porch, her expression smug beneath her expensive fur-trimmed coat. Sarah's heart burned with the injustice of it all, but what could she do? She was alone, friendless, and now branded a thief. They untied her from the post only to drag her to the northern edge of town. The wind had picked up, driving needles of sleet into her exposed skin. Her fingers had gone numb, her feet barely able to feel the ground beneath them. When they reached the boundary marker, a simple wooden sign that read Eagle Pass Town Limits, they shoved her forward into the snow. Sarah fell hard, her hands sinking into the frozen drift. Ice crystals clung to her eyelashes, her lips. She tried to stand, but her legs would not cooperate. The cold had seeped into her bones, making every movement feel like pushing through molasses. Behind her, she heard the men's footsteps retreating, leaving her to whatever fate awaited in the wilderness. She managed to crawl a few feet before collapsing again. The snow beneath her was strangely beautiful, pristine and white, unmarred except for the trail she left behind. Sarah thought of her mother, who would never know what became of her only daughter. She thought of the letters she had written, full of hope and plans for the future. All lies now. Tears froze on her cheeks as darkness crept into the edges of her vision. The sound of hoofbeats penetrated her fading consciousness. Sarah tried to lift her head but could not manage it. The horse stopped nearby, and she heard boots crunching through snow. Strong hands touched her shoulders, turning her over gently. Through her blurred vision, she saw a man's face, weathered and strong with eyes the color of storm clouds. "Jesus," he muttered, quickly shrugging out of his thick sheepskin coat. He wrapped it around her trembling body, the warmth of it so shocking that Sarah gasped. What kind of animals would do this to a woman? He lifted her as though she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. Sarah tried to speak, to thank him, but her lips would not form words. The cold had stolen her voice along with her strength. "I have got you," the man said, his voice rough but kind. "You are safe now. You are treasured now." Those words, spoken with such conviction, cut through the fog in Sarah's mind. Treasured, as though she had value, as though she mattered. It was more than anyone had said to her in years. The man carried her to his horse, a sturdy roan mare who stood patiently despite the weather. He mounted with Sarah still in his arms, arranging her carefully before him so that his body blocked the worst of the wind. Then he turned the horse away from Eagle Pass, heading west toward the setting sun. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness during the ride. She was aware of the man's solid presence, his arms secure around her, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. Once, when she stirred, she felt him adjust the coat to cover her more completely. "Not far now," he murmured. "Just hold on a little longer." The cabin appeared like a mirage through the swirling snow. It was small but well built, with smoke rising from a stone chimney. A barn stood nearby, and Sarah could see a few cattle huddled together in a sheltered area. The man dismounted and carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind them. The warmth of the cabin was overwhelming after the brutal cold. Sarah shuddered violently as her body tried to adjust. The man laid her on a bed near the fireplace, piling quilts over her before turning to stoke the fire. The flames leaped higher, casting dancing shadows across the rough wooden walls. "Name is Kane Colter," he said, not looking at her as he worked. "This is my ranch about 5 miles west of Eagle Pass. You are welcome to stay as long as you need." He brought a cup of something hot, helping her sit up enough to drink. The broth was rich and savory, warming her from the inside. Sarah's hands shook as she held the cup, and Kane steadied them with his own much larger ones. "Thank you," she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse and broken. "No need for thanks. No woman deserves what they did to you." His gray eyes met hers, and she saw genuine anger there, but not directed at her. "I was riding back from checking my northern fence line when I saw them throw you out. Figured I would wait until they left before helping. Did not want to cause you more trouble." Sarah swallowed hard. "They accused me of stealing. I did not do it, I swear." "I believe you," Kane said simply. "Mrs. Whitmore has a reputation for blaming others for her own failings. Half the town knows it, but no one will speak against her husband." The relief that flooded through Sarah was almost as overwhelming as the warmth. Someone believed her. This stranger, this cowboy who had saved her life, believed her without question. Over the next few hours, Kane worked quietly around the cabin. He prepared more food, tended to his animals, and periodically checked on Sarah. She dozed fitfully, her body trying to recover from the ordeal. When she woke fully, darkness had fallen, and Kane sat at a rough wooden table, mending a bridle by lamplight. Sarah struggled to sit up, and he was at her side immediately. "Easy now. You took a hard chill. Need to rest." "I cannot impose on you," Sarah said, though she had no idea where else she could go. "You have been so kind, but I should not burden you further." Kane's expression was stern. "You are not a burden. And you are not going anywhere until you are strong enough to travel safely, if that is what you decide to do." "If?" Sarah asked. He hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I could use help around here. Ranch work is endless, and I am just one man." "If you were willing to work, you would have a place to stay and wages. Honest work for honest pay." Sarah studied him in the lamplight. Kane appeared to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. His clothes were worn but clean, his hands calloused from labor. Everything about him spoke of a man who worked hard and lived simply. "What kind of help?" she asked cautiously. "Cooking, mending, maybe helping with the chickens and the garden when spring comes." "I am not asking for anything improper," Kane added quickly, color rising in his cheeks. "You would have privacy. I can sleep in the barn." "Absolutely not," Sarah said firmly. "If I stay, I will not force you out of your own home. I can make a pallet by the fire." They argued about it for several minutes before reaching a compromise. Kane would string a blanket across one corner of the cabin to give Sarah a private sleeping area, while he would keep his bed on the opposite side. It was not perfect, but it was respectable enough given the circumstances. As Sarah settled back under the quilts, exhaustion pulling at her, she watched Kane work. He moved with an easy confidence, his hands steady and capable. She thought about the moment he had found her in the snow, the way he had looked at her with such concern, the words he had spoken. "You are treasured now." She did not know yet what those words would come to mean, but something in her heart had stirred at the sound of them. Something that had been frozen for a very long time. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Sarah woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, her body stiff but warming. Kane had already been up for hours, judging by the chores completed. He handed her a plate of food and a cup of coffee without comment, then sat at the table to eat his own breakfast. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better." "Sore, but better." Sarah looked at her hands, noting the bandages on her wrists where the shackles had cut her. "Did you do this?" Kane nodded. "Needed cleaning and salve. You were too out of it to notice last night." The thought of him caring for her injuries with such gentleness made Sarah's throat tight. "I do not know how to repay your kindness." "Then stop trying," Kane said, but there was no harshness in his tone. "Finish your breakfast. If you are feeling up to it, I will show you around the place." The ranch was small but well maintained. Kane had about 20 head of cattle, a few horses, chickens, and a milk cow. The land stretched for 100 acres, he explained, most of it grazing pasture with a creek running through the southern portion. He had inherited it from his father 3 years ago and had been working it alone since. "No family?" Sarah asked as they walked back toward the cabin, snow crunching under their boots. "Not anymore. Ma died when I was young. Pa passed from pneumonia in 1879. Got a brother somewhere up in Montana, but we have not spoken in years." Kane glanced at her. "What about you?" Sarah told him about her mother in Philadelphia, the sickness that was slowly taking her, the money Sarah had been saving for passage home. She spoke of coming to Texas 5 years ago with her father, who died of fever within months of their arrival. At 18, alone and afraid, she had taken the first job she could find. "I wrote to my mother every month," Sarah said softly. "Sent what money I could spare. She is all I have left in the world." Kane was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "How much do you need for the passage?" Sarah told him, and he nodded thoughtfully. "If you work through spring, I can pay you enough to make the journey and have some left over. Fair wages for fair work." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. "Why are you being so kind to me?" He stopped walking and turned to face her. The morning sun caught in his gray eyes, making them almost silver. "Because everyone deserves kindness, especially when the world has been cruel. And because I see something in you, Sarah Ashford. Strength. Courage. You did not break, even when they tried their hardest to break you." No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen her as anything more than a pair of hands to sew or clean or serve. But Kane looked at her as though she mattered, as though she was more than the sum of her circumstances. "I will work hard," she promised. "You will not regret helping me." "I know I will not," Kane said, and smiled for the first time. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines and revealing a warmth that made Sarah's heart skip unexpectedly. They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Sarah proved herself capable and industrious, rising early to prepare breakfast, mending Kane's worn clothing, keeping the cabin clean and organized. She learned to milk the cow, collect eggs, and even helped Kane with some of the lighter ranch work. The physical labor was demanding, but it felt honest in a way her work at the general store never had. Kane was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He treated Sarah with unfailing respect, never making her feel uncomfortable or vulnerable. He taught her how to handle the chickens without getting pecked, how to read the weather by watching the cattle's behavior, how to start a fire that would burn all night without needing tending. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Sarah mending while Kane carved small figures from scraps of wood. He had surprising skill, creating delicate horses and cattle that he said he sometimes sold in town. They talked about small things at first, the weather, the animals, the work that needed doing. But gradually, their conversations deepened. Sarah learned that Kane had wanted to be a teacher when he was young, that he loved reading but rarely had access to books. She told him about her dreams of seeing the ocean, of visiting the great cities back east. They discussed philosophy and religion, politics and poetry, discovering that, despite their different backgrounds, their minds met on common ground. One evening in late January, nearly a month after Kane had rescued her, Sarah was preparing dinner when she realized she was humming. The awareness struck her suddenly. She was happy. Despite everything that had happened, despite being cast out and nearly dying, she was happy here in this small cabin with this quiet cowboy. She glanced over at Kane, who sat at the table cleaning his rifle. He looked up and caught her watching, and something passed between them, a spark of recognition that made Sarah's breath catch. She saw her own realization reflected in his eyes. This thing growing between them was more than gratitude, more than convenience. It was something neither of them had been looking for, but it was there nonetheless, undeniable and growing stronger each day. The weather turned colder again in February, another storm system sweeping through southern Texas with unusual ferocity. Kane had to spend long hours outside ensuring the animals were protected, breaking ice on the water troughs, checking for cattle that might have wandered too far from shelter. Sarah worried each time he went out, watching from the cabin window until he returned, often covered in snow and half frozen. One particularly brutal afternoon, Kane came in shaking with cold, his lips blue and his movements sluggish. Sarah recognized the signs of dangerous chill immediately, having experienced it herself. She acted without thinking, helping him out of his wet clothes and wrapping him in blankets by the fire. She heated water and made him drink hot tea laced with honey, rubbing his hands and feet to restore circulation. "You are taking care of me now," Kane said, his teeth chattering. "You took care of me first," Sarah replied, kneeling before him to massage his frozen feet. "Fair is fair." His hand touched her hair, a gentle gesture that made her still. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, her heart pounding. "These past months, having you here, it has been the best time of my life. I know I am just a rancher with not much to offer, and I know you are planning to go back east to your mother. But before you leave, I need you to know that I have come to care for you, deeply." Sarah's hands trembled. "Kane, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything, I just needed you to know." He looked away as though expecting rejection. "I will keep my word about the wages. You will have enough to go home by spring." She rose to her knees, bringing herself eye level with him. "What if I do not want to go?" His gaze snapped back to her, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. What? What if I have found something here that matters more than anything I left behind? Sarah's voice shook, but she pressed on. My mother has my aunt and cousins to care for her. I send money every month, and that helps more than my presence would. But you, Kane, you are alone, and I am alone. Except when we are together, we are not alone anymore. Kane's hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. Are you certain? I do not want you to give up your dreams for me. My dreams have changed, Sarah whispered. They look different now. They look like this cabin, this ranch, this life. They look like you. He kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate. Sarah melted into him, her hands fisting in the blankets wrapped around his shoulders. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. I love you, Kane said, his forehead resting against hers. I have loved you since the moment I picked you up from the snow and felt your heart still beating. I thought I was just saving a life, but you saved mine too. This place, it was just wood and land before. You made it a home. I love you too, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. I did not think I could feel this way about anyone, but you showed me kindness when the world was cruel. You gave me value when I had been thrown away. You treasured me. They held each other as the storm raged outside, the fire crackling warmly beside them. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but full of promise. Sarah thought about the girl she had been, dragging herself through the snow, certain she would die alone and forgotten. She could never have imagined this moment, this man, this love that burned brighter than any fire. As February turned to March, Kane and Sarah made plans. They would marry as soon as the weather cleared enough to travel to the next town, where no one knew Sarah's name or the false accusations against her. Kane wanted to do it properly, with a real preacher and legal papers. Sarah agreed, though she told him she would have married him in the cabin with just God as their witness. You deserve better than that, Kane insisted. You deserve everything. They prepared for the journey, but before they could leave, an unexpected visitor arrived at the ranch. Sarah was hanging laundry on the line Kane had strung between two posts when she heard a wagon approaching. Her stomach clenched with fear. What if someone from Eagle Pass had come for her? Kane emerged from the barn, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. But as the wagon drew closer, he relaxed slightly. It is Doc Morrison from town. He is a good man. The doctor was elderly, with a shock of white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He climbed down from his wagon slowly, favoring his left leg. Kane greeted him respectfully, and Sarah hung back, uncertain. Miss Ashford, the doctor said, addressing her directly. I have been searching for you. May I speak with you both? They invited him inside, and Sarah served coffee while Kane waited tensely. Finally, the doctor spoke. I owe you an apology, young lady. We all do. Mrs. Whitmore confessed the truth about the brooch 3 weeks ago. She was in her cups at the saloon, and it all came spilling out. Her husband has gambling debts he has been hiding from Mr. Whitmore Sr. She took the brooch to sell it, panicked when he noticed it missing, and blamed you. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. She confessed, in front of 24 witnesses. Marshal Davies arrested her on the spot. She is awaiting trial now. The doctor looked genuinely pained. What we did to you, casting you out in that cold, it was unforgivable. Judge Thornton has resigned in disgrace. The whole town is ashamed. Kane's arm came around Sarah's shoulders, protective and possessive. What is done is done. Sarah has a new life now. I understand, the doctor said. But legally, she has been cleared of all charges. Her name is restored, and the town council has authorized me to offer restitution. It is not much, but it is something. He placed a small leather pouch on the table. $300 and a formal letter of apology. Sarah stared at the pouch, her mind reeling. $300 was more money than she had ever seen at once. Combined with the wages Kane had already given her, it was enough to bring her mother to Texas, to help build a larger house on the ranch, to buy more cattle and expand Kane's holdings. "I do not know what to say," she managed. "Say you forgive us," the doctor pleaded. "Though I will understand if you cannot." Sarah thought about bitterness, about holding on to anger and letting it poison her future. She thought about Kane finding her in the snow, about the kindness that had saved her life. She thought about the love they had built from the ashes of injustice. "I forgive you," she said quietly. "Not because it is easy, but because I refuse to let the worst moment of my life define all the moments that come after." The doctor's eyes glistened. "You are more gracious than we deserve." He stood, preparing to leave. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you need only ask." The people of Eagle Pass will not forget this debt. After he left, Sarah and Kane sat in silence, processing what had happened. Finally, Kane spoke. "You are free now, truly free. You could go anywhere, do anything." Sarah turned to him, taking his face in her hands. "I am already where I want to be. With you. The money means we can build something real together. We can bring my mother here if she is well enough to travel. We can expand the ranch. We can build the future we talked about." Kane pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "Are you absolutely certain? I will not hold you to anything if you have changed your mind." "I have never been more certain of anything in my life," Sarah said. "Now, are you going to marry me or not, Kane Colter?" He laughed, a sound of pure joy. "I am going to marry you so fast your head will spin, Sarah Ashford, just as soon as I can get you to a preacher." They traveled to San Antonio the following week, a 3-day journey that felt like an adventure. Sarah had never seen the city, and she marveled at the bustling streets, the grand buildings, the mixture of cultures blending together. Kane bought her a dress for the wedding, a simple but beautiful gown in soft blue that made her eyes shine. They were married in a small church on a sunny March morning. The preacher's wife and the church organist served as witnesses. Kane wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, looking so handsome that Sarah's heart stuttered when she saw him waiting at the altar. When he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, his hand shook slightly. "With this ring, I thee wed," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise to treasure you every day for the rest of my life." Sarah spoke her vows through happy tears, promising to love and honor him, to build a life and a home together. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Kane's kiss was tender and full of promise. They spent 2 nights in a hotel, a luxury neither had experienced in years. Kane was gentle and patient on their wedding night, treating Sarah with a reverence that made her feel cherished beyond measure. They talked for hours in the darkness, planning their future, dreaming aloud about children and grandchildren and growing old together on their ranch. "I want to name it Sarah's Hope," Kane said, trailing his fingers through her loose hair. "The ranch, I mean, because you brought hope back into my life." "That is beautiful," Sarah whispered, kissing him softly, "but it is our hope now, both of ours together." They returned to the ranch as husband and wife, ready to begin their life in earnest. Sarah wrote to her mother, explaining everything that had happened and enclosing enough money for her aunt to hire help for her care. She invited her mother to visit when she was well enough, promising a home with them for as long as she wanted it. Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers across the Texas prairie. Sarah planted a large garden, and Kane built her a chicken coop, 3 times the size of the old one. They bought 10 more head of cattle and a young mare that Sarah named Blossom. The ranch thrived under their combined efforts, the land responding to their care and attention. In May, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She told Kane one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, his arm around her shoulders. He went very still, then turned to her with wonder in his eyes. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be. Doc Morrison confirmed it yesterday when I went into town." Sarah placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Kane swept her into his arms, spinning her around carefully before setting her down and kissing her soundly. "A baby, our baby. Sarah, I am the happiest man alive." They spent the evening making plans, discussing names and preparing the cabin for the new arrival. Kane insisted on building a proper bedroom for them, expanding the cabin to include a separate nursery. He worked tirelessly through the summer months, determined to have everything ready before winter. Sarah's mother sent a letter in June, her handwriting shaky but full of joy. She blessed the marriage and the coming grandchild, expressing gratitude for the money Sarah had sent that had allowed her to receive better medical care. She was improving, the doctors said, and hoped to make the journey to Texas by the following spring to meet her grandchild. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Sarah bloomed with it, her skin glowing, her happiness evident in every movement. Kane was attentive to the point of being overbearing, constantly worried about her health and safety. Sarah bore his fussing with good humor, touched by his concern even when it frustrated her. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him when he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I know, but I cannot help worrying. You and this baby are my whole world." Kane took the basket from her anyway, earning an exasperated but fond look. In September, they received word that Mrs. Whitmore had been convicted and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Her husband had divorced her and left Eagle Pass in disgrace. Sarah felt a measure of satisfaction at the news, though mostly she felt pity. Bitterness and greed had destroyed Mrs. Whitmore's life, while Sarah's had blossomed into something beautiful. "I am grateful to her in a way," Sarah told Kane one evening. "If she had not falsely accused me, I would never have met you. I would still be sewing in that store, alone and unhappy, saving money for a future that would never satisfy me." Kane's hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling their child move beneath his palm. "I cannot bring myself to be grateful for what you suffered, but I understand what you mean. Strange how the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes." Their son was born in late October during a gentle autumn evening. Doc Morrison attended the birth, along with 2 women from a neighboring ranch who had befriended Sarah. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Kane feared he would lose her. He paced outside the cabin, praying harder than he ever had in his life. But when he finally heard the baby's first cry, followed by Sarah's exhausted laugh, relief flooded through him so powerfully that his knees nearly buckled. The doctor emerged, smiling. "You have a healthy son, Kane, and your wife is doing well. Come meet your boy." Kane entered the cabin to find Sarah propped up in bed, sweaty and pale but smiling radiantly. In her arms was a tiny bundle, and when she pulled back the blanket, Kane saw his son's face for the first time. The baby had dark hair like his own and Sarah's delicate features. He was perfect. "Meet Kieran," Sarah said softly, named after Kane's late father. "Kane Colter." Kane sat carefully on the edge of the bed, touching one finger to his son's tiny hand. Kieran's fingers wrapped around it instinctively, and Kane felt his heart expand to a size he had not known possible. "He is beautiful. You are amazing. I love you both so much." The first months of parenthood were challenging but joyful. Kieran was a healthy, hungry baby who kept them up at all hours. Kane and Sarah took turns walking him when he was fussy, singing lullabies in the dark hours of night. They marveled at every milestone, every smile, every new sound. Sarah's mother arrived in April, her health much improved. She was a gentle woman in her 50s who wept with joy at meeting her daughter's family. She settled into the new bedroom Kane had built, declaring that she would stay for at least a year to help with the baby and to get to know her son-in-law properly. "You saved my daughter's life," she told Kane one evening while Sarah was putting Kieran to bed. "I can never repay that debt." "You raised an incredible woman," Kane replied. "Any debt is repaid by that alone." With Sarah's mother there to help, the ranch prospered even more. She was an experienced gardener, and soon they had vegetables enough to sell in town. Sarah resumed her sewing, taking in orders for fine dresses and shirts that brought in additional income. Kane expanded the herd to 50 head of cattle and began breaking horses to sell. Kieran grew into a lively toddler with his mother's curiosity and his father's quiet determination. He loved the animals, especially the horses, and would spend hours watching Kane work with them. Sarah often found the two of them in the barn, Kieran chattering away while Kane patiently explained what he was doing. In the summer of 1885, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. This time, Kane was slightly less panicked, having been through it before. But he was no less attentive, ensuring Sarah rested and ate well. Their daughter was born in February of 1886, a quick labor that surprised everyone. Alina had her mother's auburn hair and her father's gray eyes. She was quieter than Kieran had been, content to watch the world with solemn attention. Kieran adored his baby sister, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to feeding times. The years passed in a rhythm of work and love, challenges and triumphs. Sarah's mother lived with them until she passed peacefully in her sleep in 1890, surrounded by her family. They buried her on the ranch beneath a cottonwood tree, and Sarah planted wildflowers on her grave that bloomed every spring. Kieran grew tall and strong, with his father's skill with horses and his mother's head for business. Alina was quieter but just as capable, showing a gift for healing animals that reminded everyone of her grandmother's gentle touch. They were joined by two more siblings, another son named Samuel in 1888 and a daughter named Emily in 1892. The ranch expanded to 200 acres. Kane and Sarah built a proper ranch house in 1895, though they kept the original cabin as a guest house. It was a point of pride for both of them, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1903, Kane and Sarah sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson. Their children were grown, or nearly so, Kieran helping to run the ranch, Alina engaged to a kind young doctor from San Antonio, Samuel showing promise as a horse trainer, and Emily still in school but already talking about being a teacher. "You ever think about that day I found you?" Kane asked, his arm around Sarah's shoulders, her gray-streaked auburn hair soft beneath his chin. "Sometimes," Sarah admitted, "though it feels like a different lifetime, like it happened to someone else. You were so small, so cold. I thought you might die before I got you home." Kane's voice was rough with remembered fear. "I could not bear the thought of it. This person I had never met, but I knew somehow that you were important, that you were meant to survive." Sarah turned in his embrace, looking up at the face she loved more than any other, lined now with age but still strong, still handsome to her eyes. "You told me I was treasured. Do you remember?" "I remember every word, every moment of that day." Kane cupped her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "And you have been treasured every day since. You always will be." "As have you," Sarah whispered, kissing him softly. "You rescued me from the snow, but I think I rescued you too, from loneliness, from a life half lived." "We rescued each other," Kane agreed. Built something beautiful from the ashes. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, the sounds of their grandchildren playing in the yard reaching them faintly. Kieran and his wife had 3 children already, and Aliner's wedding would bring another family into their fold. Sarah thought about the girl she had been, thrown into the snow to die, branded a thief, alone and afraid. She thought about the moment Kane's arms had closed around her, the first kindness she had known in so long. She thought about the life they had built together, brick by brick, year by year, through hardship and joy, struggle and triumph. "I would go through it all again," she said suddenly. "Every moment of pain and fear if it led me back to you." Kane tightened his arms around her. "You will never have to. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel that kind of cold again, that you never doubt your worth or your place in this world." "I know," Sarah said simply. "I have always known, from the moment you picked me up. You saw me, truly saw me, when the rest of the world looked away. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." As the years continued to unfold, the legacy of Kane and Sarah's love spread through their children and grandchildren. The ranch became known throughout southern Texas as a place of integrity and hard work, where animals were treated well and employees were paid fairly. Kane and Sarah's story became something of a legend in the area, passed down as an example of how kindness and love could triumph over cruelty and injustice. In 1910, Sarah received an unexpected letter from Eagle Pass. The new mayor, a man Sarah vaguely remembered as the postmaster's son, wrote to inform her that the town council wished to name a new school building in her honor. They acknowledged the terrible wrong done to her and wanted to make amends by creating something positive from the tragedy. Sarah discussed it with Kane, uncertain how to respond. "Part of me wants to refuse," she admitted, "to let the past stay buried. But another part of you sees the value in forgiveness," Kane guessed, knowing her so well after nearly 3 decades together. "Yes. If my story can teach people to be kinder, to think twice before judging, perhaps some good can come from it." Sarah looked at her husband. "What do you think?" "I think you have one of the biggest hearts I have ever known," Kane said, pulling her close. "Whatever you decide, I support you completely." Sarah agreed to the dedication, and they traveled to Eagle Pass for the ceremony. The town had changed significantly, grown larger and more prosperous. Many of the people who had witnessed her humiliation were gone or had forgotten, but some remembered. An elderly woman approached Sarah after the ceremony, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "I watched them throw you out," she said brokenly. "I did nothing. I am so sorry." Sarah took the woman's hands gently. "You are forgiven. We are all capable of standing by when we should act. What matters is learning from our mistakes." The town erected a small plaque at the site where Sarah had been cast out. It read, "In memory of injustice, in hope of mercy. May we always choose kindness over cruelty." Sarah stood before it with Kane's hand in hers, feeling a sense of completion. The circle was closed. The wound was healed. They returned to the ranch, to the life they had built, to the family that surrounded them with love. Sarah resumed her routines, her garden, her grandchildren. But something had shifted inside her. The last vestiges of pain from that terrible day had finally released their hold. In 1918, as the world reeled from war and influenza, the ranch stood as a haven of peace. Kane and Sarah weathered the storms together, as they always had, protecting their family and supporting their community. They lost Samuel's wife to the flu, a tragedy that brought them all to their knees with grief. But they rallied together, caring for Samuel and his 4 children, demonstrating once again that love was stronger than loss. Kane's health began to fail in 1920. He had lived a hard life, worked his body to its limits, and now it was catching up with him. Sarah nursed him devotedly, determined to give him the same care he had once given her. She read to him in the evenings, held his hand through the pain, whispered her love into his graying hair. "I am not afraid," Kane told her one autumn evening as they sat on the porch. He was thinner now, moving slowly, but his mind was sharp and his love was undiminished. "I have had the best life a man could hope for. You gave me that." "We gave it to each other," Sarah corrected, her voice thick with tears she refused to shed in front of him. "And you are not going anywhere yet, Kane Colter. We still have grandchildren to spoil and great-grandchildren to meet." He smiled, that same warm smile that had captured her heart so many years ago. "Yes, we do. I am just saying when the time comes I am at peace. No regrets, only gratitude." But Kane rallied, and they had 3 more precious years together. Years filled with laughter and memories, with family gatherings and quiet moments, with the love that had sustained them through everything. He died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1923, with Sarah lying beside him, her hand in his. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people. Ranchers and townspeople, business owners and ranch hands, all came to pay their respects to a man who had lived with integrity and died with dignity. Sarah stood dry-eyed through the service, her children and grandchildren surrounding her with support. It was only later, alone in the cabin where it had all begun, that she allowed herself to weep. She stood in the place where Kane had first brought her, where he had wrapped her in his coat and told her she was treasured. She could almost hear his voice, feel his arms around her. "Thank you," she whispered into the empty room. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for every moment we shared." Sarah lived another 12 years, dying peacefully at the age of 85 in 1935. She remained active until the end, tending her garden, telling stories to her great-grandchildren, passing down the wisdom she had gained through a long and full life. Her children made sure she knew every day how loved she was, how her strength and grace had shaped them all. On her last day, surrounded by 3 generations of family, Sarah smiled peacefully. "I am going to see him now," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "My cowboy, he is waiting for me." Eleanor held her mother's hand, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Tell Daddy we love him. Tell him we will take care of the ranch just as you both taught us." "He knows," Sarah said, her eyes already looking beyond this world. "He has always known." They buried her beside Kane beneath the cottonwood tree, her grave marked with a simple stone that read, "Sarah Colter, 1860–1935. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she was treasured." The ranch remained in the family, passed down through generations, each one adding their own story to the legacy. The cabin was preserved and eventually turned into a small museum, telling the story of Kane and Sarah Colter, of love born from tragedy, of kindness in the face of cruelty. Visitors came from far and wide to hear the tale of the woman thrown into the snow and the cowboy who rescued her. They stood in the cabin where it had all begun, reading the letters and looking at the photographs, learning about 2 ordinary people who had created something extraordinary together. The story became a part of Texas folklore, told around campfires and in classrooms, adapted into songs and stories. But the truth at the heart of it remained simple and powerful. That one act of kindness can change a life, that love can bloom in the harshest conditions, that every person has value and deserves to be treasured. In the end, what Kane and Sarah had built was more than a ranch or a family legacy. It was a testament to the power of human compassion, to the strength found in partnership, to the belief that no one is beyond redemption or unworthy of love. Their story reminded people that even in the darkest moments, hope could survive. That even when the world was cruel, there were still those who would choose kindness. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this life, two souls walked hand in hand through fields of wildflowers, reunited at last, treasuring each other for all eternity just as they had treasured each other in life. Their love story, born in snow and cold, had burned bright and warm through the decades, a beacon of hope that continued to shine long after they were gone. The lesson of their lives was simple but profound. Everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be treasured. And when we extend that treasure to others, when we choose compassion over judgment, kindness over cruelty, we create something that transcends our individual lives. We create a legacy of love that echoes through time, touching hearts and changing lives in ways we may never fully know. Sarah Ashford Colter had been thrown away, cast into the snow to die, branded a thief and denied her humanity. But Kane Colter had seen her truth, had recognized her worth, and had given her not just his coat and his home, but his heart and his life. Together, they had proven that love was stronger than injustice, that kindness could overcome cruelty, and that two broken people could heal each other and build something beautiful. Their story ended, as all stories must, with death and parting. But the love they shared, the family they built, the values they instilled, these things lived on. In their children's children and their children's children's children, the legacy of Kane and Sarah Colter continued, a reminder that one cold day in December 1882, a cowboy made a choice. He chose compassion. He chose to see value where others saw only waste. He chose to treasure a woman whom the world had thrown away. And that choice, made in a moment, had rippled outward through time, changing countless lives and creating a legacy that would never be forgotten. It was a story of the Wild West, yes, with its harsh conditions and unforgiving landscape. But more than that, it was a story of the human heart, of its capacity for both cruelty and kindness, and of the choice we each make about which path to follow. Kane and Sarah chose kindness. They chose love. And in doing so, they created something eternal,